The cavernous assembly hall of the Galactic Council stretched beyond typical dimensional perception, a testament to architectural engineering that defied human comprehension. Crystalline surfaces reflected holographic representations of dozens of alien civilizations, each delegation occupying a precisely designated spatial quadrant that represented millennia of diplomatic negotiations and territorial agreements. Elena Rodriguez stood at the periphery of this magnificent chamber, her dark blue diplomatic uniform crisp and tailored, a stark contrast to the elaborate and often bioluminescent attire of the other representatives. At 38, she carried herself with a composure that spoke of generations of diplomatic training, though her presence was relatively new to this interstellar gathering. The Council's president, a towering crystalline being from the Zortak homeworld, manipulated several holographic interfaces simultaneously. Translucent tendrils extended from its central mass, each appendage controlling different communication streams with an efficiency that would have impressed even the most advanced human technological experts. The being's primary communication node, what might be considered its face, shifted colors continuously, a complex language of chromatic communication that ran parallel to the verbal exchanges. Representative Rodriguez, the Zortak president, intoned, its voice a complex harmonic that translated through multiple linguistic matrices. The Council recognizes the human delegation. A wave of subdued electromagnetic pulses and auditory emissions swept through the chamber. To the untrained observer, it might have seemed like a simple background noise. To Elena, it was unmistakably laughter. A multilingual, multi-species derision that spoke volumes about the Council's current perception of humanity. The human representatives were the newest addition to the galactic diplomatic community, having only made formal contact 43 standard galactic cycles ago. Most civilizations in the Council measured their existence in hundreds of thousands of cycles, making humanity appear like a momentary curiosity, a fleeting species barely emerging from its planetary cradle. Elena approached the central speaking platform, her steps measured and deliberate. The platform itself was a marvel of adaptive technology, shifting and transforming to accommodate the physiological requirements of different species. For the Chlorian representatives, it would become a liquid substrate. For the silicon-based Krelon, it would transform into a crystalline structure. For humans, it remained a simple raised platform of neutral metallic composition. The murmurs continued. Representative Clar from the Andromeda Cooperative let out a particularly sharp frequency that translated to something akin to a dismissive chuckle. The Proximan delegation exchanged rapid series of bioluminescent signals that Elena knew were communicating their collective amusement. She knew exactly what they were thinking. Humans, a species that had only recently achieved stable interplanetary travel. A civilization that had spent more time fighting among themselves than exploring the cosmos. A young, impulsive race that seemed more interested in economic competition and territorial disputes than the grand cosmic collaborations that defined galactic diplomacy. What they did not know was that Elena Rodriguez was not a typical diplomatic representative. Her selection was the result of a complex, multi-generational preparation program that had identified and cultivated diplomatic talent with surgical precision. Behind her calm exterior was a mind that had been trained to analyze, predict, and strategically navigate the most complex interspecies negotiations imaginable. The Zortak president's communication node pulsed with an expectant amber hue. Representative Rodriguez, the Council awaits your statement. Elena stepped forward, her hands clasped behind her back, a deliberate gesture of openness and confidence. The translation matrices hummed to life, ready to convert her words into the dozens of communication spectrums represented in the chamber. She would make them listen. She would make them understand. This was humanity's moment. The origins of Elena Rodriguez's exceptional preparation traced back to a strategic initiative launched by the United Earth Diplomatic Corps shortly after humanity's first contact with extraterrestrial civilizations. Recognizing the vast knowledge gap between humans and established galactic societies, The Corps had implemented a radical approach to diplomatic training that went far beyond traditional international relations methodologies. Alina's journey began in the specialized diplomatic academies of New Geneva, a research complex dedicated to developing humanity's interstellar communication and negotiation capabilities. Here, candidates underwent a comprehensive selection process that was part psychological evaluation, part intellectual crucible, and part predictive modeling. The Academy's approach was revolutionary. They sought diplomats who could not just represent humanity, but fundamentally understand and strategically navigate the complex tapestry of galactic civilizations. Her academic credentials were extraordinary by any standard. A triple doctorate in xenopolitical science, advanced game theory, and cross-cultural systemic analysis set her apart from traditional diplomatic candidates. But it was her additional specialized training that truly distinguished her. The Adaptive Predictive Negotiation Program, a classified initiative developed by the most brilliant human strategists, had transformed her into something more than a traditional diplomat. For 7 consecutive years, Alina had immersed herself in comprehensive studies of every known galactic civilization. Her research went far beyond surface-level cultural understanding. She developed intricate psychological profiles of entire species, mapping their collective decision-making processes, economic vulnerabilities, and deep-rooted cultural traumas. Each civilization became a complex system to be understood, not just a political entity to be negotiated with. The Proximan diplomatic archives, typically impenetrable to outside researchers, had been systematically decoded through her innovative linguistic and cognitive analysis techniques. She had developed algorithmic models that could predict potential diplomatic tensions with unprecedented accuracy, breaking through communication barriers that had stymied human researchers for decades. Her preparation extended to practical simulations that pushed the boundaries of diplomatic strategy. The United Earth Diplomatic Corps had constructed advanced holographic environments that allowed her to practice negotiations with hyper-realistic representations of alien civilizations. These simulations were so sophisticated that they incorporated quantum probability modeling, allowing for dynamic responses that mimicked the complexity of actual interspecies communication. A critical component of her training involved understanding the fundamental differences in cognitive processing across various species. The Zortak, with their multi-dimensional thought patterns, required a completely different approach compared to the linear thinking Krelon. Alina had developed a unique cognitive mapping technique that allowed her to anticipate potential communication breakdowns before they could occur. Her personal history was equally remarkable. The daughter of a Brazilian diplomat and a Chinese quantum computational theorist, Alina had been groomed from childhood to understand complex systemic interactions. Family discussions during her youth were intricate debates about global, and eventually galactic, political dynamics. Her parents had recognized her exceptional analytical capabilities early and had nurtured them with a carefully designed educational approach. The United Earth Diplomatic Corps had invested unprecedented resources in her development. Specialized neural interface training allowed her to process vast amounts of information with a speed and accuracy that approached computational levels. She could analyze multiple communication streams simultaneously, detecting subtle nuances that would escape traditional diplomatic observers. Her final training phase involved a classified program that pushed the boundaries of human cognitive capabilities. Advanced meditation techniques combined with neurological optimization protocols had expanded her ability to maintain composure and strategic thinking under extreme psychological pressure. Where traditional diplomats might become frustrated or reactive, Alina could maintain a level of detached analysis that was almost machine-like in its precision. The dossiers she had compiled on each galactic civilization were works of extraordinary depth. Each file was a comprehensive analysis that went beyond traditional diplomatic intelligence. They were living documents that incorporated predictive modeling, historical analysis, and complex systemic understanding. Her research had uncovered diplomatic and economic interconnections that most species were not even aware existed. As she stood in the Galactic Council chamber, Elena Rodriguez was the culmination of humanity's most ambitious diplomatic preparation program. She was not just a representative, but a strategic asset, a diplomat who represented humanity's potential to understand, analyze, and ultimately transform the complex systems of galactic interaction. The mockery of the other civilizations was about to meet its most significant challenge. The procedural discussions of the Galactic Council proceeded with their typical intricate complexity. Each representative moved through carefully choreographed diplomatic protocols that had been established over millennia of interstellar interactions. Holographic data streams cascaded around the chamber, displaying economic metrics, resource allocations, and ongoing diplomatic negotiations across multiple star systems. Elena Rodriguez listened with remarkable patience, her neural interface subtly processing multiple communication streams simultaneously. She observed the delicate dance of galactic diplomacy, a complex system of indirect communications, subtle provocations, and carefully measured responses that had maintained a fragile equilibrium for countless generations. The current discussion centered on resource allocation in the Orion Centauri Trade Corridor, a region known for its complex economic interdependencies. Representative Joar from the Proxima Collective was presenting a standard proposal for redistributing mineral extraction rights, his bioluminescent communication patterns suggesting a sense of confident superiority. Elena's moment came with surgical precision. "Esteemed council members," she began, her voice calm and measured, "I noticed an interesting correlation in the resource allocation models presented by the Proxima delegation." The chamber fell into a subtle state of anticipation. Her opening was deliberately neutral, a linguistic technique designed to lower defensive barriers. Jar's communication tendrils flickered with a hint of uncertainty. The human representative was not following the expected diplomatic script. The current mineral extraction projections for the Orion Centauri corridor, Elena continued, demonstrate a systematic undervaluation of secondary geological formations. Specifically, the predictive models fail to account for emerging extraction technologies that could significantly alter resource potential. What appeared to be a simple technical observation was, in fact, a precisely aimed intellectual dart. Elena had identified a critical weakness in the Proximan economic modeling, a flaw that would become increasingly apparent as technological capabilities advanced. The Zortak president's communication node shifted to a deep amber, indicating heightened analytical processing. Other delegates began cross-referencing Elena's statement with their own computational systems. Within moments, the first cracks appeared in the Proximan delegation's confident presentation. Their economic models, which had remained unchallenged for several galactic cycles, suddenly revealed subtle but significant inconsistencies. Elena's approach was methodical. She was not attacking the Proximan delegation directly, but exposing systemic limitations in their analytical methodologies. Each statement was constructed as a neutral observation, yet carried the potential to fundamentally challenge established diplomatic and economic narratives. As the discussion progressed, she continued to introduce similarly precise observations. A comment about communication protocol inefficiencies in the Andromeda Cooperative, a nuanced analysis of resource distribution patterns in the Krelon trading networks. Each statement was backed by comprehensive data, presented with an academic detachment that made direct confrontation impossible. The other delegations began to shift uncomfortably. What had started as mockery was transforming into a growing sense of unease. The human representative was not behaving like a novice diplomatic entity. She was systematically exposing structural vulnerabilities in established galactic systems. Representative Klar from the Andromeda Cooperative attempted to redirect the conversation, introducing a standard diplomatic deflection about interstellar cultural exchange programs. Elena's response was immediate and surgical. "An interesting proposal," she said, "though the current cultural exchange metrics demonstrate a significant asymmetry in information flow. The current models predominantly benefit established civilizations while providing minimal developmental opportunities for emerging species." The statement was revolutionary in its implications. She was challenging not just a specific diplomatic proposal, but the fundamental framework of galactic interaction. The Zortak president's communication node cycled through multiple colors, a complex emotional and analytical response that suggested growing fascination mixed with professional concern. Elena Rodriguez was not simply participating in the diplomatic session. She was conducting a masterclass in strategic communication, using the Council's own protocols and procedural frameworks to challenge their established perceptions. Each carefully constructed statement was a precision instrument designed to create microscopic fissures in the complex diplomatic and economic structures that had remained unchallenged for generations. She was revealing humanity's true potential, not through military might or technological superiority, but through the most powerful weapon in their arsenal: intelligent, strategic analysis. The initial mockery had transformed into something else entirely: confusion, concern, and the first hints of genuine respect. The transformation began with a holographic projection that materialized above the central council platform. Elena's neural interface had been quietly compiling a comprehensive network analysis that would fundamentally reshape the understanding of galactic diplomatic relationships. "Distinguished council members," she began, her voice maintaining a clinical precision, "I would like to present a comprehensive analysis of the interconnected diplomatic and economic relationships that have remained obscured for multiple galactic cycles." The first layer of the holographic display revealed a complex web of diplomatic connections. Thin luminescent lines connected various alien civilizations, creating an intricate network that pulsed with data points representing trade agreements, historical conflicts, and resource dependencies. What made the presentation extraordinary was not just the visual representation, but the depth of analysis behind each connection. Elena had spent years developing advanced algorithmic models that could trace diplomatic relationships with unprecedented accuracy. The system went beyond traditional diplomatic intelligence, incorporating historical context, economic modeling, and predictive analysis. The Proximan delegation's communication tendrils began to fluctuate erratically, a clear sign of growing distress. The holographic display was revealing interconnections that many civilizations had carefully worked to conceal. One particularly sensitive revelation focused on the Krelon-Zortak resource exchange agreements. The analysis demonstrated a systematic pattern of diplomatic manipulation that had been ongoing for several centuries. What appeared to be a standard trade partnership was, in fact, a complex mechanism of economic exploitation that disadvantaged several smaller civilizations. Representative Joar attempted to interrupt, but the Zortak president's communication node pulsed with a restraining frequency. The council was transfixed by the unfolding presentation. Elena's analysis went deeper. She began to expose the subtle mechanisms of diplomatic power that had remained hidden for generations. The Andromeda Cooperative's cultural exchange programs were revealed to be sophisticated intelligence-gathering operations. What had been presented as humanitarian efforts were, in fact, carefully constructed methods of economic and cultural infiltration. The holographic display continued to evolve, each new layer revealing more complex interconnections. Trade agreements that seemed benign on the surface were shown to have intricate clauses that systematically disadvantaged emerging civilizations. Communication protocols that appeared neutral were demonstrated to have built-in biases that maintained the power structures of established galactic entities. What made Elena's presentation remarkable was her approach. She was not attacking specific civilizations, but exposing systemic issues in the current galactic diplomatic framework. Each revelation was presented with academic detachment, supported by comprehensive data analysis that left no room for direct refutation. The most significant revelation came with a deep dive into resource allocation strategies. The holographic display began to show how certain civilizations had manipulated geological survey data to maintain monopolies on critical resource zones. Entire star systems had been systematically overlooked or misrepresented, their potential resources hidden to maintain existing power structures. Representative Klar from the Andromeda Cooperative attempted to challenge the presentation, but the data spoke for itself. Elena had not just collected information, She had developed a comprehensive analytical framework that could deconstruct even the most complex diplomatic facades. The neural interface she utilized allowed her to process and present information at a speed and depth that far exceeded traditional diplomatic communication methods. What would have taken standard diplomatic channels months or years to uncover was being presented in a matter of moments. As the presentation continued, the mood in the chamber transformed. The initial mockery had long since disappeared, replaced by a growing sense of profound unease. The human representative was not just presenting information. She was fundamentally challenging the established galactic diplomatic paradigm. The Zortak president's communication node cycled through a complex series of colors, indicating a state of intense analytical processing. The holographic display continued to pulse with information, each new revelation more significant than the last. Alina's final statement was delivered with remarkable calm. What I present today is not an accusation, but an opportunity. These systemic inefficiencies represent a chance for comprehensive diplomatic reformation that could benefit all galactic civilizations. The chamber fell into a profound silence. The diplomatic landscape had been irrevocably altered. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, not with military might or technological superiority, but with something far more powerful, a comprehensive, strategic understanding of complex systemic interactions. The mockery was over. A new era of diplomatic engagement was about to begin. The economic framework Alina Rodriguez presented to the Galactic Council was nothing short of revolutionary. Her analysis went beyond traditional economic modeling, introducing a comprehensive approach that challenged fundamental assumptions about resource allocation, technological development, and inter-civilization economic interactions. The holographic display transformed, revealing a dynamic economic model that pulsed with intricate data streams. Unlike previous presentations that relied on static historical data, Alina's model incorporated adaptive predictive algorithms that could project economic potential based on emerging technological capabilities and systemic innovation potential. Her primary argument centered on a critical insight. The current galactic economic system systematically disadvantaged emerging civilizations through complex, multi-layered barriers that were not immediately apparent. These barriers were not explicit prohibitions, but sophisticated structural mechanisms that limited developmental opportunities. The first layer of her economic deconstruction focused on technological transfer protocols. The existing framework appeared neutral on the surface but contained subtle clauses that effectively prevented smaller civilizations from accessing advanced technological resources. Alina demonstrated how these protocols created artificial scarcity and maintained the economic dominance of established galactic powers. Representative Joar from the Proximate Collective attempted to interrupt, but the holographic display continued its relentless presentation. Each data point was meticulously sourced, each projection backed by comprehensive computational analysis that left no room for casual dismissal. The economic model revealed unexpected vulnerabilities in the current galactic economic structure. Technological innovations were being systematically suppressed through complex regulatory mechanisms that appeared benign but were fundamentally restrictive. The Andromeda Cooperative's research funding protocols, for instance, were shown to contain subtle biases that limited innovative potential for emerging civilizations. Alina's approach was particularly remarkable in its holistic perspective. She was not simply critiquing the existing system, but presenting a comprehensive alternative framework. The model she proposed would create more dynamic pathways for technological and economic development, breaking down the artificial barriers that had maintained the current power structures for generations. The computational complexity of her presentation was extraordinary. Her neural interface allowed for real-time analysis that could process multiple economic scenarios simultaneously. Where traditional economic models might take cycles to develop, Alina's framework could generate comprehensive projections in moments. A critical revelation emerged in the resource allocation segment of her presentation. The existing galactic economic system had created complex mechanisms that effectively locked emerging civilizations into perpetual developmental limitations. Resource extraction rights, technological licensing agreements, and inter-civilization trade protocols were shown to be sophisticated tools of economic control. The Zortak president's communication node cycled through multiple analytical frequencies, indicating deep computational processing. The other delegations remained in a state of profound silence, their communication patterns suggesting a mix of confusion, concern, and grudging respect. Alina's economic model introduced several revolutionary concepts. She proposed a dynamic resource allocation framework that would adjust based on actual developmental potential rather than historical power structures. The model incorporated advanced predictive algorithms that could identify and support emerging innovative capabilities across different civilizations. The most significant aspect of her presentation was its fundamental philosophy. Rather than viewing economic interactions as a zero-sum competition, Alina's framework presented economic development as a collaborative, adaptive system. Each civilization would have more meaningful opportunities for genuine technological and economic growth. Her analysis exposed how the current system essentially penalized innovation and creativity. Smaller civilizations that demonstrated unique technological approaches were often systematically marginalized through complex regulatory mechanisms. The economic model she proposed would create more fluid pathways for technological and economic exchange. The holographic display continued to evolve, presenting increasingly complex layers of economic analysis. Representative Klar from the Andromeda Cooperative made several attempts to challenge the presentation, but the comprehensive nature of the data left little room for substantive counterarguments. As the presentation reached its conclusion, Alina delivered her most profound statement. Economic development is not about maintaining existing power structures, she said, her voice maintaining a clinical precision. It is about creating adaptive systems that can recognize and support genuine innovation across all civilizations. The chamber remained in a state of profound transformation. What had begun as a diplomatic session was becoming something entirely different. The human representative was not just presenting an economic model. She was offering a fundamental reimagining of galactic economic interactions. The mockery that had characterized the initial reception of humanity had completely disappeared. In its place was a growing recognition of a profound truth. Humanity's greatest strength was not technological superiority, but a unique capacity for systemic understanding and innovative thinking. The economic landscape of the galaxy would never be the same. The psychological analysis phase of Alina Rodriguez's presentation represented a pivotal moment in the Galactic Council proceedings. Her approach transcended traditional diplomatic discourse, introducing a comprehensive framework of historical and psychological interpretation that challenged fundamental assumptions about interstellar civilization dynamics. The holographic display transformed, revealing an intricate network of historical connections that map the psychological evolution of various galactic civilizations. Each representation was a complex three-dimensional model that captured not just historical events, but the underlying cognitive patterns that drove collective decision-making. Alina began by addressing the Proximant Collective's historical conflict patterns. The holographic model demonstrated how their current diplomatic strategies were deeply rooted in a series of resource conflicts that occurred nearly 17,000 galactic cycles ago. What appeared to be rational diplomatic approaches were, in fact, deeply ingrained psychological responses to historical traumas. Civilizations are not purely rational entities, Alina explained, her voice maintaining a clinical precision. They are complex psychological systems that carry collective memories, inherited trauma, and deeply embedded response mechanisms. The Zortak president's communication node pulsed with an intense amber frequency, indicating high-level analytical processing. The other delegations remained in a state of profound attention, their communication patterns suggesting a mix of confusion and growing respect. Her analysis revealed unexpected interconnections between seemingly unrelated galactic conflicts. The Krelon's aggressive territorial expansion policies, for instance, were shown to be a direct psychological response to a catastrophic ecological collapse in their primary star system thousands of cycles ago. What had been interpreted as military aggression was, in fact, a deeply ingrained survival mechanism. The psychological model went beyond surface-level historical analysis. Alina had developed a sophisticated predictive framework that could anticipate potential diplomatic tensions based on collective psychological patterns. Each civilization was revealed to have unique cognitive signatures that influenced their diplomatic and strategic approaches. Most remarkably, her presentation demonstrated how these psychological patterns created systemic limitations in inter-civilization communications. The communication protocols that had been established over generations were fundamentally flawed, designed around outdated understanding of cognitive interactions. Representative Joar from the Proximant Collective attempted to challenge the presentation, but the comprehensive nature of the analysis left little room for substantive counterarguments. Each claim was backed by extensive data, presenting a level of psychological insight that far exceeded traditional diplomatic intelligence gathering. The model exposed critical vulnerabilities in existing diplomatic frameworks. Communication channels that appeared neutral were revealed to be fundamentally limited by collective psychological biases. Diplomatic agreements that seemed rational were shown to be deeply influenced by inherited collective traumas and cognitive limitations. Alina's approach was particularly revolutionary in its holistic perspective. She was not simply critiquing existing diplomatic approaches, but offering a comprehensive framework for understanding inter-civilization interactions. The psychological model proposed more adaptive communication strategies that could account for collective cognitive variations. The computational complexity of the presentation was extraordinary. Her neural interface allowed for real-time analysis that could process multiple psychological scenarios simultaneously. Where traditional diplomatic intelligence might take cycles to develop, Alina's framework could generate comprehensive psychological projections in moments. A critical revelation emerged in the section addressing conflict resolution mechanisms. The existing galactic diplomatic systems were shown to be fundamentally limited by collective psychological blind spots. Conflict resolution protocols that appeared rational were revealed to be deeply flawed, unable to account for the complex psychological dynamics of different civilizations. The holographic display continued to evolve, presenting increasingly complex layers of psychological analysis. Each civilization was revealed not as a monolithic entity, but as a complex system of collective cognitive patterns, historical experiences, and adaptive responses. As the presentation reached its conclusion, Alina delivered her most profound statement. "Understanding is not about eliminating differences," she said, "but about recognizing the complex psychological systems that drive our collective interactions." The chamber remained in a state of profound transformation. What had begun as a diplomatic session was becoming something entirely different. The human representative was offering a fundamental reimagining of inter-civilization communication and understanding. The mockery that had characterized the initial reception of humanity had completely disappeared. In its place was a growing recognition of a profound truth. Humanity's greatest strength was not technological superiority, but a unique capacity for comprehensive systemic understanding. Psychological analysis had become a weapon more powerful than any traditional diplomatic tool. The way civilizations understood themselves and each other would never be the same. The turning point arrived with calculated precision. Alina Rodriguez stood at the center of the Galactic Council chamber, her posture embodying the strategic calm that had become her hallmark throughout the proceedings. The previous revelations, economic, psychological, and diplomatic, had systematically dismantled the existing power structures. Now came the moment of transformation. "Distinguished representatives," she began, her voice carrying a tone of professional collaboration rather than confrontation. "I present a comprehensive framework for restructuring galactic diplomatic and economic interactions." The holographic display materialized, revealing a multi-layered proposal that was simultaneously radical and meticulously considered. Unlike previous diplomatic initiatives that sought to maintain existing power dynamics, Alina's proposal represented a fundamental reimagining of inter-civilization collaboration. The framework addressed 4 critical domains of galactic interaction: technological exchange, resource allocation, communication protocols, and collaborative development mechanisms. Each domain was presented with a level of detail that demonstrated not just theoretical potential, but practical implementation strategies. The technological exchange model proposed a dynamic certification system that would remove existing barriers to innovation. Smaller civilizations would gain structured pathways to access advanced technological resources, with safeguards that protected both innovative potential and existing technological ecosystems. The model introduced adaptive learning mechanisms that could rapidly integrate new technological approaches across different civilizational contexts. Resource allocation became a collaborative framework rather than a competitive mechanism. Alina's proposal introduced a dynamic valuation system that accounted for potential innovation, ecological sustainability, and developmental capacity. The traditional mineral extraction rights would be replaced by a more nuanced approach that incentivized long-term sustainable development. The communication protocols represented perhaps the most revolutionary aspect of the proposal. A new multi-layered translation and interpretation system would be developed, incorporating the psychological insights revealed in her earlier analysis. This system would go beyond traditional linguistic translation, creating adaptive communication frameworks that could account for the complex cognitive variations between different civilizations. Representative Joar from the Proximan Collective attempted to interrupt, but the comprehensive nature of the proposal left little room for substantive objection. The Zortak President's communication node cycled through multiple analytical frequencies, indicating intense computational processing. The collaborative development mechanisms were particularly innovative. Alina proposed the creation of a new Galactic Research and Development Consortium that would provide structured support for emerging civilizations. This was not a charitable program, but a strategic approach to unlocking collective innovative potential across different species and technological paradigms. What made the proposal extraordinary was its systemic approach. Alina was not proposing a simple restructuring, but a comprehensive reimagining of galactic interactions. Each component of the framework was intricately connected, creating a dynamic system that could adapt and evolve. The economic models embedded in the proposal demonstrated how this new framework would create more opportunities for all civilizations. By removing artificial barriers and creating adaptive pathways for development, the system would unlock potential that had been systematically suppressed under the existing structures. As Alina continued her presentation, the mood in the chamber transformed. The initial mockery had long since disappeared, replaced by a growing sense of profound possibility. The human representative was offering more than a diplomatic proposal. She was presenting a vision of collaborative potential. The psychological insights developed earlier were integrated into every aspect of the proposal. Communication mechanisms, resource allocation strategies, and collaborative frameworks were designed to account for the complex cognitive variations between different civilizations. Representative Klar from the Andromeda Cooperative leaned forward, the communication tendrils indicating a state of intense analytical engagement. The proposal challenged every existing assumption about inter-civilization interactions, yet it was presented with such comprehensive detail that dismissal became impossible. Alina's final statement cut through the chamber with remarkable clarity. "This is not a proposal of human superiority," she said, "but a framework for collective advancement. Our differences are not obstacles, but opportunities for comprehensive growth." The Zortak President's communication node pulsed with a frequency that suggested a profound shift in perspective. The diplomatic landscape was fundamentally altered. What had begun as a potential moment of diplomatic humiliation had transformed into something extraordinary. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, not through military might or technological superiority, but through a comprehensive understanding of complex systemic interactions. The chamber remained in a state of profound potential. A new era of galactic cooperation was about to begin. The final session of the Galactic Council convened under a profound sense of transformation. The chamber, which had once rang with mockery toward humanity, now vibrated with a complex mixture of respect, anticipation, and fundamental recalibration of established diplomatic paradigms. The voting procedure itself was unprecedented. Rather than following the traditional hierarchical decision-making protocols, the Council had been compelled to develop an entirely new framework of collective decision assessment. Elena Rodriguez's comprehensive proposal had fundamentally challenged every existing mechanism of inter-civilization negotiation. The Zortak president initiated the proceedings, its communication node pulsing with a frequency that suggested deep computational deliberation. Representative Rodriguez, the entity announced, the Council will now formally evaluate the comprehensive framework proposed by the human delegation. What followed was not a simple yes or no vote, but a sophisticated multi-stage assessment process. Each civilization would contribute computational and strategic analysis, creating a dynamic evaluation model that considered multiple potential implementation scenarios. The complexity of the assessment was itself a testament to the profound nature of Elena's proposal. The Proximan Collective's representative was the first to submit a formal analysis. Their computational systems, which had initially approached the human proposal with skepticism, now demonstrated a remarkable level of engagement. The framework proposed by Elena addressed systemic vulnerabilities that the Proximans had recognized but never successfully articulated. Representative Jar's communication tendrils indicated a state of professional acknowledgement. The psychological and economic models presented by the human delegation had exposed critical limitations in existing galactic interaction mechanisms that the Proximans had long suspected but never successfully challenged. The Andromeda Cooperative's assessment followed, revealing an equally transformative perspective. Their computational analysis demonstrated that Elena's proposal would unlock significant developmental potential across multiple civilizations. The framework was not a simple redistribution of resources, but a dynamic system that could adapt to emerging technological and cultural innovations. Representative Clar's communication patterns suggested a level of professional respect that had been entirely absent during the initial stages of the diplomatic session. The human representative had not just presented a proposal, she had offered a comprehensive reimagining of inter-civilization potential. The voting process itself was a marvel of computational complexity. Each civilization's assessment was integrated into a multi-dimensional decision matrix that considered economic potential, psychological compatibility, technological innovation capacity, and long-term collaborative potential. The traditional binary voting mechanisms were replaced by a nuanced, adaptive assessment framework. As the computational systems processed the proposal, the chamber maintained an extraordinary state of collective anticipation. The initial mockery had been completely replaced by a sense of profound possibility. Humanity was being evaluated not as a junior civilization, but as a potential catalyst for comprehensive galactic transformation. The first indication of the decision came through subtle shifts in the communication frequencies of the various delegations. The Zortak president's communication node began to pulse with a frequency that suggested positive computational resolution. The collaborative potential of the proposed framework exceeds traditional diplomatic assessment parameters, the president announced. The statement was more than a simple procedural communication. It was a fundamental acknowledgement of a new diplomatic paradigm. The final vote was not a simple majority decision, but a complex computational consensus that integrated multiple layers of strategic assessment. Each civilization's computational systems contributed to a comprehensive evaluation that went beyond traditional diplomatic mechanisms. When the final determination was announced, it represented more than a diplomatic decision. It was a collective recognition of a fundamental truth. Humanity's greatest strength was not technological superiority or military capability, but a unique capacity for comprehensive systemic understanding. The proposal was approved with an unprecedented level of collaborative support. More than a diplomatic victory, it represented a fundamental transformation of galactic interaction mechanisms. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of the chamber, her posture maintaining the same calm professionalism that had characterized her entire presentation. She had not defeated the existing galactic powers. She had offered them a pathway to collective advancement. The Zortak president's final communication carried a profound significance. Humanity is no longer an emerging civilization, the entity announced. Humanity is a strategic partner in galactic development. As the council session concluded, the diplomatic landscape had been irrevocably transformed. The mockery that had characterized humanity's initial diplomatic interactions had disappeared, replaced by a sense of profound potential. A new era of galactic cooperation was about to begin.